Good evening. Tonight I'm reading another bedtime story from Folktales from India, edited by A.K. Ramanujan. This is a Kannada tale called The Clever Daughter-in-Law. There was a mother-in-law who was a terrible tyrant. She gave her daughter-in-law no freedom. She saw to it that the young woman did all the housework, cleaned the cowshed, and carried water from the well. By this time it would already be evening. Mother and son would then eat by themselves and give the daughter-in-law leftovers and stale rice. If the young woman so much as breathed a complaint, the mother-in-law would pick up a broomstick and rain blows on her head. If she wept, the old woman would let loose a barrage of abuse. "You slut, you hussy, you want to wash away our house in your tears and bring bad luck, you daughter of a prostitute," and so on. The son was meek and kept his mouth shut. In their backyard, a snake-gourd plant grew and thrived. Long gourds swung from it. Everyone's mouth watered when they saw the gourds. In season, the mother-in-law would make a big potful of a delicious snake-gourd talada. She and her son would eat most of it and give the daughter-in-law their leavings. Once, after several days of this semi-starvation, the young woman was seized with a craving to eat a full meal of the delicious snake-gourd talada. That day, the daughter-in-law came home in a hurry with her garbage basket and called to her mother-in-law. "Why are you howling like a vixen?" shrieked the old woman. "What's the matter with you?" "I ran into Big Auntie's husband. He says Auntie isn't well and wants to see you. She is seriously ill and holding on to her life only to see you, he said. He wanted me to tell you that." "Yo, my sister is dying. Oh, sister, what happened to you?" cried the mother-in-law, beating her breast. "Come in now, I'm sautéing the talada. You take care of it. I'll go and see my sister," she said, and left the house. The daughter-in-law was quite excited. She made some more talada. She cooked all sorts of other dishes and served her husband a big meal. Then she poured all the talada into a big vessel, took it on her hip, and went out as if she was going to get water for the house. She went straight to the temple of Kali, the black goddess, entered it, and closed the door behind her. There was no one there. She sat there and ate the entire potful of talada. The goddess, who was looking on, was astonished at the speed of her eating and the quantity she consumed. In her amazement, she put her right hand on her mouth. The daughter-in-law didn't notice any of this, but continued to eat to her heart's content. When she was done, she belched a big belch of utter satisfaction, picked up the empty vessel, and went to the pond to wash it. When she came home with a pot of water, the main door of her house was closed. Her mother-in-law had returned. She tapped on the door, which was soon opened by her angry mother-in-law. Sparks were flying from her eyes. She had a stick in her hand and rained blows on the young woman's back and waist till she fell to the ground, crying pitifully. "You daughter of a prostitute, how long have you waited to cheat me like this? You've gobbled up a potful of talada like a buffalo, you dirty slut," screamed the woman, and rained some more blows. When the husband came home, he too joined in the punishment. Meanwhile, the whole town was buzzing with the news that the image of Kali in the temple now had its hand on its mouth. People from other towns also came to see this miracle, and they all had their own interpretation. Everyone was scared that this was a bad sign. Something terrible was going to happen to the village, they thought, and shuddered. "Someone has polluted the goddess. That's why she has shut her mouth with her hand. She is angry. There won't be any more rain. No children will be born in this village any more," they said, terror-stricken. Worship and rituals were performed all over the village. They arranged festivals and sacrificed goats, but nothing seemed to please the goddess. So the village elders sent the town crier through the area to announce a big reward to anyone who could make the goddess remove her hand from her mouth. No one came forward. The daughter-in-law watched all this. One day she came to her mother-in-law and said, "Mother-in-law, tell the elders we'll get the goddess Kali to remove her hand from her mouth. I know how to do it." The mother-in-law was furious at first. "Look at this fool. She wants me to lose face in the village. She wants to act big, as if she was a holy woman. What no one could do, she says she'll do. Fat chance," she sneered. But the daughter-in-law persisted and finally convinced her that she knew something no one else knew. On the appointed day, the young woman took her tamarind broomstick and the garbage basket full of rubbish and went to the temple. She shut everyone out and closed the door behind her. She put down the basket in front of the black goddess and, brandishing her broomstick, challenged Kali. "You jealous female! What's it to you if I ate my snake-gourd Talada? Why do your eyes burn? If you'd only asked me, I'd have given you some. May your face burn, may your cheeks swell and explode, may your eyes sink in your face burn, may your eyes sink in and go blind. Will you take your hand off your mouth now, or shall I beat you with my broomstick? Now!" There was no answer. The daughter-in-law was furious. She looked like Kali, the black goddess herself. She went up to the image and gave Kali's face several whacks with her broomstick. Kali whimpered and cried, "Ay-yo!" and removed her hand from her mouth. The image now looked as it had always looked. "That's better," muttered the daughter-in-law. She picked up her basket and broom and came home with the news that she had managed to get Kali to take her hand off her mouth. The whole village was agog with the news. They ran to the temple to see for themselves, and they couldn't believe their own eyes. They praised the daughter-in-law as the greatest of chaste wives, a pativrate, whose virtue had given her miraculous powers. They gave her a big reward and many gifts. Now the mother-in-law was terrified by this incident. She felt that her daughter-in-law had strange powers and would take revenge against her for the terrible things she had done to her all those years. The young woman knew some kind of magic, and who knew what she might do? On a dark new moon day, at dead of night, mother and son whispered to each other. She said to him, "Son, this one frightened even Kali, the mother goddess, and made her take her hand off her mouth. She won't let us go unharmed. We have beaten her, starved her, given her every kind of trouble. She'll take revenge. She'll finish us off. What shall we do?" "I can't think of anything. You tell me," said the cowardly son. The mother said, "She's asleep now. We'll wrap her up in the mat, take her to the fields, and burn her in the pit there. Then I'll get you a beautiful new bride." "All right, let's do it right now," said he, and they both gagged the young wife quickly and rolled her in her bedclothes and mat. She knew they were going to do something awful to her, but she mustered her courage and lay still. They carried her to the pit in the field outside the village and hid her behind a bush while they went looking for twigs and firewood. As soon as they left, she rolled around and loosened the mat, slid out of it, pulled off the string around her hands, and took the gag from her mouth. She found a log nearby, which she wrapped in her bedclothes and mat. Then she walked a short distance away, climbed a banyan tree, and hid herself in its branches. Mother and son came hurrying back. They spread twigs and branches all around the bundle in the mat, put more firewood over it, covered it with dry straw, and lighted it. The fire burned with leaping flames as they watched it. When the knots in the branches crackled and burst, they said, the bones are splitting." When the log inside caught fire, a large knot cracked in the flames and went off like a gunshot. They were satisfied that the skull had now exploded, as it does in a cremation. It was long past midnight, and they went home. The daughter-in-law crouched hidden in the branches. That same night, 4 robbers came there to sit under the tree and divide up their loot. They had just broken into a rich man's mansion and plundered jewels, gold, and cash. As they sat down, they saw a fire burning a distance away, so one of them climbed the tree to see if there was anyone near the fire. He came right up to the branch where the young woman was perched. When he saw someone sitting there, he said softly, "Who's there?" She boldly put out her hand, gently shut his mouth, and whispered, "Shh, not so loud. I'm a celestial. I'm looking for a good, handsome man. I'll marry you and make you rich beyond your dreams. Just be quiet." The robber couldn't believe what was happening to him. He thought he had reached heaven and seen the great white elephant descend from the sky. He took her hand and said, "Are you for real?" She said, "Hmm." Then she slowly pulled out her little bag of betel leaf and betel nut, gave him some, and put some into her own mouth. He came closer to kiss her. She turned away, saying, "Look, we're not married yet, but you can put your betel leaf into my mouth with your tongue. When I've eaten from your mouth, I'll be as good as your wedded wife. All right?" Beside himself with joy, he put out his tongue with the chewed betel leaf on it and brought it close to her mouth. She at once closed her teeth powerfully on his tongue and bit it off. Screaming with unbearable pain, he lost his grip and fell down. The robbers below ran helter-skelter in panic. The man who had lost his tongue could only babble and blabber and spit blood, making noises like ba 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 ba, as he too ran after his companions. His noises scared them even more, and they fled faster, with him squealing behind. When it was light, the daughter-in-law cautiously climbed down the tree and saw to her amazement the gold, jewels, and money under the tree. She quickly bundled it all up and went straight home. When she tapped on the door, calling out, "Mother-in-law, mother-in-law, please open the door," the old woman opened the door hesitantly, her face blanched with fear. There in front of her was her smiling daughter-in-law. The mother-in-law fainted at the sight. The young woman carried her into the hall, sprinkled cool water on her face, and revived her. The husband just stood there, not knowing what to think. When she came to and opened her eyes, the mother-in-law asked, How is it you are?" The daughter-in-law briskly replied, "After you cremated me, messengers from Yama, the god of death, took me to him. His eyes were shooting flames like the eyes of our Kali, our village goddess. As soon as he saw me, he said, 'Send this one back. Her mother-in-law is a sinner. Bring her here, and put the iron crow to work on her, to tear her to pieces with its beak. Dip her in cauldrons of boiling oil.' He ranted on like that about you. I fell at his feet and begged him, 'Don't do this to my mother-in-law. She is really a very fine woman. Give me whatever punishment you wish, but please spare my mother-in-law.' He was pleased. He even smiled and said, 'You can go now. We'll do as you say, but if your mother-in-law ever gives you any trouble, we'll drag her here. My messengers will always be watching.' Then he gave me all this gold and jewelry and money and sent me home. People say bad things about the god of death, but he was so good to me." The mother-in-law embraced her daughter-in-law with fear and trembling in her heart. "Ah, you're really the angel of this house. You've saved me from the jaws of death's messengers. From now on I'll do as you say. Just forgive everything I've done to you." "Will you, my darling daughter-in-law?" she said, touching the young woman's chin tenderly. The daughter-in-law was now the boss in the house. Her mother-in-law and her husband followed her wishes, and everyone was happy. The end.